Nobody ever has a problem hearing me, so I'm just going to put this down. How's everybody tonight? I'm Barbara Dershowitz. Good evening. Thank you so much for coming out this evening. Is everybody comfortable? I want you to be comfortable. I want to begin by acknowledging our veterans and our current servicemen and women. Thank you for your service. Never forget. So, I'm a practical change management specialist. My job is to work with individuals, groups, and organizations as they move from their current status quo through the change process to a new normal that is stable, that feels right, and that works to their best advantage. My clients include college students and recent college graduates, midlife career changers, retirees, baby boomers, individuals in recovery, families in crisis and life cycle transitions, and decision makers, managers, and employees of nonprofit and for-profit organizations. Hold on. I don't want to miss anything that I want to say to you. My clients come to me because they are challenged by a change in their personal or professional lives or in their organizations. This could be a change that they want for themselves, or it could be a change that has been visited upon them by an external source. But whatever type of change it is, they come to me and they tell me, this change is making me crazy. And what I want to tell you about the word crazy is it's very interesting because as a hobbyist, I'm a painter. And I have long been told that certain chemicals will make my acrylics craze. I don't know if you're familiar with that term. This concept of crazy means that something cracks, that it doesn't go smoothly. My work with my clients is designed to help them identify their objectives and move smoothly through a process that otherwise would make them crazy, so that they can be delivered fully functioning, sane, and intact to their best possible new normal. When my clients come to me, I share with them this basic fundamental fact that I wish everybody could get. I was just speaking with my new friend Anne in the back here, and she was telling me what I already know, and what you know for a fact, but perhaps nobody has actually articulated this, and it is this. As a culture, as a society, as a civilized society, we argue and discuss how to teach our children about many phenomena that affect their lives. We argue about what we should teach them in terms of sex and reproduction. We argue about what we should teach them in science in terms of creationism versus evolution and the phenomenon of gravity. We talk about all these things, but we fail to instruct about how to manage change, which is the most constant companion that any of us has throughout our lives. So when I'm with my clients for the first time, I tell them what I'm telling you, that which is the premise of my nifty little book here, The Secret Life of Change, which I'm going to be happy to give you all for free at the end of the program this evening. And it's this. Change does not have to be a painful or chaotic experience. The fact of the matter is that change is far less stressful and much more productive when you know how to think about it, when you know what to expect as you're going through it, and when you know how to manage it instead of letting change manage you. So when I'm in my first, I actually had a vision tonight, that I would sit on a chair like that, and we would have like a group session type thing for change management, and we can do that after the presentation. But then I had this awful vision of how awkward it is for someone my height to get into it. I figured I would stand here and talk. When my clients come to me, we start with 10 foundational principles of change management. I'm going to share those principles with you. They're in summary on your sheet so you can follow them along, and also on the PowerPoint. When I'm done, we can open the floor for questions, and then that repast smells delightfully inviting. Thank you so much. So let's begin, okay? Oh, Sue, what'd I do? I changed it in the wrong way. You need to change it back.
Go forward.
Go forward. There we go. Go forward, my motto. Agreed. So at the start of any discussion, I think it's so important to define our terms, to make sure that everybody is talking about the same thing and that we're on the same page together. So let's talk about what we're talking about when we talk about change. Change is the most powerful, the most profound, and the most persistent phenomenon in the universe. What makes it so? Change is the most powerful phenomenon in the universe because it has the power to take things, situations, emotions, beliefs from their current condition, to make them somehow different through a process to change them, and then to deliver them into a new condition, what we call the new normal. There is no other phenomenon in the world that can do that. That is the property and the identity of change. Change occurs every time there is a shift, a difference, a distinction, no matter how subtle or significant in the way things are. This means that change is everything that has happened, that is happening currently, and that will happen in every moment, and the next, and the next, and the next, ad infinitum. And this means that everything that happens in your life, everything in every moment, is change as well. Change is the most profound phenomenon in the universe because its power affects everything. Every living organism, every functioning organization, every inanimate object, every system, every structure, every situation, everything changes. Everything in the world is changing, has changed, and will change again. Nothing is exempt from change. Without the phenomenon of change, though, nothing would happen in the world. The universe would come to a halt. Everything would freeze in suspended animation. Nothing would occur. Nothing would happen to anyone or anything at any time, ever. That is the profound power of change. Now here is the great paradox of change. Change is the most persistent phenomenon in the universe because although change changes everything, change itself persists. When all else has become different, change itself will endure. This constancy of change is one of the few realities that we can actually count on. As the 12th century Japanese priest Seigo said, every single thing changes and is changing always in this world. When you understand that change alone has the power to bring about a new normal, that everything is subject to the profound power of change, and that change is constant and persistent, you can start to think logically and clearly about how change works, what change does in the world and in your experience. And here's the bottom line, Anne and everybody, you don't have to like change, but you do need to expect it. And I would add, you need to respect it. So that's number one. Okay, here we go. Let's see if I learned anything. Yeah, okay, there we go. Number two. Now this may seem obvious, but let's look at this because it matters. There's only two sources of change. It either comes from you, which we call a self-source change, or it comes from an external change, which we call an other-source change. Self-source change is change that originates from your own motivation. It's the product of your own decision to go through the change process and to bring about an outcome, a new normal, that you have chosen or that you desire for yourself. Other source change is change that is somehow involves or affects you, but it's been decided by a source outside yourself. So some examples of these other sources, these are typically sources that you feel have some type of authority or influence over yourself. So a parent, a spouse, a teacher, a religious leader, a workplace supervisor, or institutional sources that you likewise perceive have authority or influence over you, like religion, government, corporate policy, and situational sources that introduce change into your life because you just happen to be in that place at that time. So natural disasters, your train running late, surprise birthday parties, all of these other sources have the means, the motive, and the opportunity to introduce new things into your life and or your organization, whether you want them to or not. So as you know from your own experience, self-source change is far easier to manage than other source change. This is true because self-source change, you yourself are the driver of the change, the one responsible for deciding and bringing about the new normal. Self-source change typically aligns with your desires and your values, and it aims toward a new normal for which you have some degree of inclination and enthusiasm. So as a result, it's easier to organize your change plan, assemble your resources, overcome your obstacles, and move to your desired outcome. On the other hand, because other source change is motivated by a source that is not yourself, a change driver that is not you, other source change may not be concerned very much, if at all, with your desires or your values. As a result, other source change will have, or possibly may have, no relationship to your desired outcome. And in fact, it might actually conflict with your desired outcome, with your values, and with your desires. And when this happens, you may find that your own forced, coerced, or obligated participation in the other source change is unenthusiastic, confused, frustrated, resentful, even damaging to the change process, to the other people who are involved in the change process, and to yourself. When you understand that change can appear in your life or your organization motivated only by either you or by a source completely outside of yourself, you're better able to understand how to manage your response to those changes. And we're going to get to how to do that in a moment. So that's principle number 2. Now, this is my second favorite part. Every change is evolutionary, even when it appears to be revolutionary. And if you can remember that, you can retain a good deal of your sanity when change makes you crazy, and here's how. Evolutionary change is change that occurs gradually over time. It produces a new normal according to an orderly, predictable schedule. So some examples: a toddler growing in, an infant growing into a toddler, the sequential attainment of an educational degree, or the continued cultivation of a business. These things are observable evolutionary growth and change. Revolutionary change, on the other hand, appears to occur suddenly and unexpectedly. It produces a new normal by radically disrupting the status quo. A political coup, a flash flood, your lover breaking it off when you thought everything was going great. These are all examples of revolutionary change. From this, it may seem that evolutionary change and revolutionary change are just different kinds of change. But in fact, all change is evolutionary, even when it appears to be revolutionary, and I'm going to explain. Take the bamboo. I don't know if you know about this bamboo. There's a bamboo that you plant, and it stays underground for about 8 years. And then, suddenly, it bursts out of the ground and it can grow to 30 feet or more within a matter of 5 or 6 weeks. So people seeing this may say this is revolutionary. There was nothing there before, and now suddenly there's something that is moving very quickly that was not there before. But they're wrong, because it was there before. While the bamboo's growth may seem to be sudden and radical, and therefore revolutionary, it's not. Actually, as we know, the bamboo has been evolving underground, preparing for its eventual new normal above the surface. So what others may perceive to be revolutionary growth, you and I know to be simply a phase in the bamboo's evolutionary change. And that is how it is with all change. No change just spontaneously occurs out of the blue, even though it may seem to. Every self-source and other source change has at its core a set of factors that motivate the change and a catalyst, an impulse, a stimulant, some kind of trigger that activates the change. When the factors and the catalyst align, the change becomes apparent. In the case of our bamboo, evolutionary change is activated when the core factor, the bamboo's genetic program, meets a fertile growth environment. In a political coup, festering social issues may be catalyzed with the appearance of a charismatic leader. In the case of a flash flood, the core factor may be the failure of the city to maintain its levees, and the catalyst may be a record rainfall. As for your lover breaking it off, I can't say what the reason is for that, but all you need to know is it's not you, it's them. In terms of practical change management, it's always easier to manage change that we perceive to be evolutionary because we can forecast, we can observe it, and we can measure it over time. It's much more difficult to manage change that feels revolutionary because we fail to anticipate it, and therefore we fail to plan for it, and we deny that it's happening. Then, when that change arrives, we are thrown into the state of unmanaged change, which is the actual definition of the word chaos. And we blame it on the revolution, when really, we just weren't paying attention to what had been evolving all along. So that's number 3. But hold on, because I see all your thought bubbles. Hold on a second. So this is the corollary to number 3. Number 4. Change is multipotent. One change can change everything. So the multipotent characteristic of change is a dynamic principle that helps really to explain why change is so powerful, so profound, and so persistent. Multipotency is a great word. It comes to us from the realm of biology, as those of you who may know. And it means the ability to produce or influence several effects or results. So saying that change is multipotent is the same as saying that one tide lifts many or all boats. This means that a change in one aspect of a person's life, or in the way an organization operates, will have an echo, a consequence, a ripple, a domino effect, in at least one other aspect as well. And this introduction to multipotency gives us the happy chance, this is my first favorite, the happy chance to chat about one of the more fun concepts of change management, which is the butterfly effect. And that's going to help further clarify the concepts of other source change and the evolutionary nature of change. So the butterfly effect, which is also called sensitive dependence, was popularized by a meteorologist named Edward Lawrence in the early 1960s. Dr. Lawrence is acknowledged to be the father of modern chaos theory, which explores how small changes can have large and wide-ranging effects. It was Dr. Lawrence's conclusion that the weather is ultimately not predictable because the flapping of a butterfly's wings in Brazil may set off a series of atmospheric events that eventually evolves into a tornado in Texas, hence the butterfly effect. So here's how the multipotency of change, the butterfly effect, actually plays out in real life and how this applies. Because individual people and organizations are integrated entities, and when I say integrated entities, by that I mean that they are made up of separately functioning parts that work together as a whole. Because we are integrated entities, a change in one part will inevitably impact one, some, many, most, or all of the other parts. For example, for a person, change in employment has the power to generate other changes in finances, in relationships, in lifestyle. A change in an organization where they might have a change in their billing system, that is going to impact the IT department, it's going to impact workflow policy, and it certainly will impact customer relations. So the multipotency of change provides the logical answer when you have exhausted all possibilities, but you're still unable to identify the other source of a change, right? If it didn't come from you, why is this happening to me? And you can't identify that other source, it's because of the multipotency of change. What's happening to you is a collateral effect of some other change. It supports our premise that all change is evolutionary, that no change just occurs spontaneously. And it informs us that why is this change happening to me? The answer may be there is a person you may never know and a set of circumstances that you may never become aware of that has added you to that chain of effects. The multipotency of change reveals that you may never find out why things started changing and then changed the way they did. Who knows? Maybe a butterfly flapped its wings somewhere. Here's another important point, though. Additionally, the multipotency of change serves to teach us that when we ourselves are the source of change, we must take into consideration the butterfly effect. We have to plan for the collateral results of the change that we have put in place. Let's get a little I don't know, clinical now, because very soon we're going to move into the realm of emotion. So let's keep this at a high level, and then we can dig a little deeper. Change is identified and measured according to the 3 S's: spectrum, size, and significance. When we talk about the spectrum of change, when we talk about the spectrum of anything, we're talking about the delimiting range in which it operates. So when we ask, what is the spectrum of change? Where does this fit on the spectrum of change? What we're asking is, does this event qualify as a change? Can it be classified as a change? But as we've said, change is everything that has happened, is happening, or will happen. So this means that every occurrence, regardless of its size or significance, qualifies as a change. So this leads to 2 important and distinctly different calculations: how to measure the size of a change and how to measure the significance of a change. The size of a change is a purely objective measurement. It's objective because the elements that answer the question can all be quantified and measured. For example, the number of people who will be involved in or affected by the change or the change process or the new normal, the resources that are going to be needed to move through the change process and into the new normal, and the multipotent effects of the change process. Those are all things that you can quantify. You can count them, you can say, this is how much money we need, these are the resources we need, these are the effects that we're going to get. The more people and resources that are involved, the more multipotent the effects are, the bigger the changes. That's how we manage the size of a change. On the other hand, the significance of a change is purely subjective, no matter its size. This means that as individuals, we determine the significance of a change based on our perception of what the change means to us personally. Thank you for nodding. I like it when people nod and smile. As you know from your own experience, what one person perceives to be a highly significant change may be just a blip on the screen to someone else. It's very frustrating to have conversations when that chasm exists in the perception of change. But it's true, because not everybody responds to change in general in the same way, and certainly not everybody responds to a specific change the same way in particular. To quote Epictetus, the Greek philosopher, people are not disturbed by things, but by the view they take of them. So regardless of the size of a change, it's always our individual perception that determines the significance of a change. And this is important to understand, because when you understand that everything that happens is change, that the size of a change is measured by quantifiable factors, but the significance of a change is measured by uniquely personal factors, then you can devise a more practical plan to manage the changes in your life or the changes that you need to bring about in the lives of someone else. I must just take a moment. I'm reminded of when I was working in New York, and we changed one of the rolling seats that one of the assistants sat on. This to us seemed a minor change. We were just moving the chairs around. But this was perceived to be a tremendous insult that she hadn't been asked, would she like a better chair? So we're all involved in struggling with bringing about changes for ourselves, right? And it's hard enough to bring a change for yourself that you want, let alone to try to convince one other person, let alone whole departments and groups of people to come along with you. And it's so important, therefore, to remember that the smallest thing that may be insignificant to you, although still small in size, may be genuinely significant to someone else. Okay. How are we doing? Good?
Excellent.
Thank you. So let's talk about why people resist and fear change, and why it's so difficult to get ourselves and others moving in the direction that we want to go. When it comes to change, there are three types of people. The first type of person is the chronically novoturian. And I must thank my daughter, Lauren. That's my husband in the back there. Hi, Steve. That's my husband, Steve. Our daughter, Lauren, when I was writing this book, she was a college student, and she actually emailed me and she said, Mom, I found this fabulous lost word. It's not part of our current vernacular, but it is an English word, and the word is novoturian. And it comes from, where did it come from? I don't have the etymology here, but it means desirous of extreme change. Novoturian folks love the whole idea of change. They deliberately seek or create change situations. They're not necessarily as passionate about the new normal that the change is going to bring about as they are about disrupting the status quo and watching things get different. Change is their idea of fun, and maybe you know somebody like this. Other people are neophobic, and that is a word from psychology that means irrationally fearful of anything new. Neophobes go to great lengths to resist change, avoid the unknown, and maintain the status quo, even, you can finish the sentence for me, even when that change would be to their benefit. Change is their idea of hell. And maybe you know people like that also. But most people fall somewhere in between the chronically novaturient and the neophobic. Most people have a mixed relationship with change. In certain situations, they are accepting, even enthusiastic. In these situations, they feel secure, they feel safe, they feel unthreatened by the change process and the new normal that the change process is going to produce. And they project that the reward of the change will be equal to or greater than the effort that they're going to have, and the stress that they're going to have to endure in order to bring the change about. And so they move forward with the change. But in other situations, these same people are fearful of, or resistant to, or stressed out by the change process and or the new normal that the change is going to produce, again, even if that change would have a positive consequence for them. So how do these people who so easily accept certain changes explain their own fear, resistance, and stress in other change situations? Here are a few of the myriad things that clients have said to me. And maybe you've said this, I think you've all said them. I like the way things are now. Raise your hand if you've said that. I've always done it this way. I don't know what to expect. If one thing changes, then so will everything else. Well, that's true. It will take too much work. I wasn't asked to participate. That's a big one for organizational change managers. And our all-time favorite, because we'll laugh, but if we're married or with our partner, we're going to get an elbow. If I change now, I'm going to have to admit that I was wrong all along. At the heart of each of these reasons, and the infinite other reasons that I get for being fearful of, resistant to, and stressed out by change, is a sense of being taken out of alignment with what we normally accept and expect, and being stressed by the anticipation of discomfort or pain if we move forward with the change process or into a new normal. This is a truth that people will not readily admit because nobody wants to appear incompetent or weak in the face of a challenge, but it is the reality of how people respond to change. And it's necessary to take this fear, resistance, and stress into account if change is to occur successfully in your own personal or professional life or in your organization. When you understand that most people won't readily disclose the reason for their fear, their resistance, and their stress in the face of change, and that they are typically rooted in a desire to avoid discomfort, pain, the unknown, then you can construct a practical change management plan so that it minimizes, deliberately minimizes people's discomfort, people's stress, people's fear, and it frees all the people involved, including yourself, to participate in the change productively, and if you do it well, even willingly. Moving on. So, we now know why people fear, resist, and are stressed out by change, but what are your behavioral options? There's only 5 things that you can do when you're faced with a change. Well, you know about the fight or flight, right? We're talking about our lizard brain, the most primitive responses that we have to fight or to flee. So the first behavioral response to change is to fight against it. Efforts to delay, derail, destroy, deny the change process and the new normal, they're all examples of the fight response. But here's the fact of the matter. Unless you are in a position to prevail in your fight against change, the likely result is that the result of the fight option is going to be your exhaustion and defeat, while the change process and the new normal remain on the agenda and on schedule to occur. So that's what happens when you try to fight change. Then there's flight. You may decide that you don't want to participate in the change, but neither do you wish to expend any energy to fight it, so you decide to remove yourself from the equation altogether, and you invoke your right to flee. Examples of the flight response include leaving, quitting, abandoning, or somehow otherwise separating yourself from the changed situation. The likely result of the flight option, hold on to this folks because this is important, the likely result of the flight option is that change is going to catch up with you anyway. The change that finds you may be either the change that you fled or that you thought you fled, or it can be a different change that was brought about by the fact that you fled. But either way, given the persistence of change, it is futile to believe that you can flee from change and that change is just going to let you go. The third possible behavioral response to change is to freeze. And the freeze response is exactly what it sounds like. You sit there, you do nothing, you hope the change just doesn't notice you or passes you by. Somehow you get, fortunately, excluded. So the likely result of the freeze option is that the lion is going to eat you as you lay there playing dead. The fourth possible behavioral response to change is to forfeit. In the fourth, to me, this is the saddest one, but in the forfeit option, you surrender to the change. You relinquish your options to fight, to flee, to freeze, and you compel yourself to participate in the change and in the new normal, but you do so without enthusiasm, without commitment, without contribution. In essence, you abdicate your humanity in exchange for what you think will be a measure of peace. The likely result of the forfeit option is that you quickly grow resentful, conflicted in a change process and a new normal that you did not desire but were unwilling to do anything with. Our final behavioral response is forward. When you opt for the forward response, you decide to move forward as an active participant in the change. You make the deliberate decision to be engaged in the change process. You purposefully express your perceptions and perspectives about the change, about the process, about the projected new normal, and you participate, now listen to this, you participate in the change process in such a way that the compromises you must make in terms of your own values and your own desires, those compromises are minimized, and the chance for your own best possible outcome is maximized. For individuals and organization decision makers, it is only the forward option that presents the opportunity for self-direction and self-expression in the change situation. In the forward option, we find the foundation for practical change management. So when I work with my clients, I tell them, I use this expression, I say that change is a cocktail of incidents and emotions. A cocktail of incidents and emotions. And what I mean by that is, if you want to take the crazy out of change, if you really want to just pull it out, you need to understand not only the nature of change and how change works, but how people process the emotional and perceptual experience of change. I found that people can manage change with greater clarity and confidence when they're shown that their own feelings and concerns about the change process, the new normal, that they are normal, and not only that they're normal, but they're to be expected. And not only are they to be expected, but I can show you, and I will show you now, a standard pattern that people pass through, 9 thresholds that people go through from the start of a change to arriving at the new normal. And this will take you on the path through the pain and the change that you have to go through. And if you know that that's going to happen, then you can say, I am here in threshold number 4, and I can expect that coming up next is threshold number 5. Let's go through them together, because I think that by becoming familiar with these thresholds of change, You'll be able to monitor your own emotional progress through the change process, and you'll be prepared for and able to anticipate the next emotional threshold that you have to cross on your way to the new normal. Importantly, you're going to be able to apply this process, understanding these thresholds, to other people who are going through a change process as well. And I think this will make you a more compassionate and therefore a more effective change manager. So here are the 9 thresholds of change. The first is decision. The word decision means to cut off, and what you are cutting off is any other option. Change does not occur unless someone, somewhere says, change will happen here. Once you cross the decision threshold, you have officially entered the change process. You can change your direction in the change process by making any decision at any time throughout the process, but you have to know that if you change your decision to enter or consider or continue in the change process, you will not arrive at the original new normal that you established for yourself as your objective when you said change is going to happen here. It's not enough to just say change will happen. You have to identify specifically what you want to change and the objective, the new normal that you want to bring about. And that only happens in the first threshold, which is decision. So now we've made a decision. We're going to bring about a new normal, and we enter the projection threshold. Projection is your personal forecast of what will happen in the change process and what will happen when you arrive at the new normal. It's a prediction. You can't know, and no matter how many of those butterfly effects you take into consideration, somebody's got a great sense of humor. There will always be one that you didn't expect, but you project. You've made the decision to change. Now, what is this going to mean to me? When you step over the projection threshold, you enter your own mind, and you imagine, and you begin planning for the next steps in the change process and yourself in the new normal. This ability to project into the future, which is called chronesthesia, is an inborn mechanism. Scientists say only human beings have it. I don't know, but I know we have it, that allows us to envision and plan for what we imagine may happen in the future based on what our experiences have been in the past. So now you're in projection, and you're thinking, what is this going to look like? What am I going to have to do? What other things am I going to have to change in order to support this new normal? And where do you find yourself? Next, you have tumbled over into the disorientation threshold. Disorientation is the perception that what you accepted and expected in the prior status quo is starting to apply less and less as you move forward in the change process. And now you're starting to feel misaligned and uncertain of what direction you should go, because what you held on to before, you've set free, and now you're kind of adrift, and you don't know what you can rely on. And so you get disoriented. You don't know what direction to turn in. When you step over the disorientation threshold, you enter a very discomforting divide between the status quo and the projected new normal. It's not a fun place to be. It's probably the first place where most people say, oh, not for me, gotta go, going back in the other direction. And stuff. But if you know that you still have 6 other thresholds awaiting you, you can say, but wait a second, everybody goes through this. This is normal. Let me move on to the struggle. Well, you're going to have a chance to rest in a second. We're coming there. But from disorientation, you either make a decision to extricate yourself from the process, or you decide, what do I have to do? And in finding out what you have to do, you enter the 4th threshold, which is struggle. That's your perception of the obstacles you're going to need to overcome and the conditions that you're going to need to realign to get from the status quo to the new normal, and your internal battle over whether or not you move forward at all. When you step over the struggle threshold, you enter into a tug of war. between the comfortable familiarity of the status quo and your commitment to bring about your projected new normal. And this conflict can be daunting. So we take a rest. And this is what I advise my clients. When they come to me, and we go through the first three, and I tell them you're going to suffer, but you're going to come out stronger at the end, there is 5. There is the 5th threshold, which is terminus. It's the middle change threshold. It's the perception that if you keep moving forward in the change process, it will be impossible to return to the prior status quo. And it's the temporary emotional and perceptual stopping point when you decide whether to abandon or continue the process. When you step over the terminus threshold, you enter a neutral zone, a kind of neutral zone in the change process, in which you can absorb your experiences so far, focus, and take a midpoint decision-making break about your direction. It is no coincidence that terminus was the Roman god of boundaries. Pivot is the 6th threshold. Pivot is the perception that your direction and focus have swiveled toward the new normal, and it marks your conscious decision to leave the original status quo behind once and for all, and to move forward. When you step over the pivot threshold, you pass through a change of course checkpoint that informs you of the direction you must face in order to move toward your new normal. Perspective is the 7th change threshold. That is the perception that you are headed in the right direction. Your awareness that there are too many variables that have already shifted for you to ever return to the prior status quo. And it marks your grasp of where you are in the process. When you step over the perspective threshold, you face the new normal with an emotion that is called in Japanese mono no awari. That is a conscious sensitivity that all things change. Perspective is a healthy place to be. So reset is the 8th change threshold, and reset is your perception that you are engaged in bringing about a new normal in the real world, that the status quo is shifting, and it marks the shift of your readiness for the new normal. When you step over the reset threshold, you get in gear to do what's necessary to support your new normal, and you begin to regard the prior status quo as just a quo you used to know. In reset, your destination is in sight. And new normal is the 9th and final change threshold. That is your realization that the original status quo has shifted according to the decisions that you made during the process, and it marks your internal shift to accept the new normal as your new status quo. When you step over the new normal threshold, you enter a new reality that has evolved as a result of your passage through the change process and the first 8 thresholds of change. If you made the right decisions and you took the right actions all the way along the way, you will arrive at the new normal that you projected for yourself, and it will be stable, and it will feel right, and it will work to your best advantage. On your change path, you can expect that you're not going to be spending too much time in this new normal because it's quickly going to turn into your current status quo. Don't be sad because persistent change will ensure a new and different trip over the decision threshold soon enough. But this time, you will know what to expect as you move through the process emotionally. Change responds to the way that it's managed. This is true. The peril of unmanaged or poorly managed change is chaos. And what is chaos? Chaos is a churning swarm of seemingly random and savage circumstances, conditions, and possibilities screeching and colliding as they crash their way through your life or your organization. No doubt you recognize this image from your own experience with a change management, or with a change that happened without anybody managing it, or without anybody managing it very well. On the other hand, the reward of practical change management is a well-managed change process that moves forward according to a workable and orderly plan and delivers you fully functioning, sane, and intact. I love that. That's like my mantra. I want to be fully functioning, sane, and intact when I come out of this change process. I will not be the same. I will be different. As long as I still have my mind, and this hasn't made me a crazy person, this has been a good experience, a positive experience. So the foundational lesson for all of us who intend to manage change successfully in our personal or professional life or in our organization is this. Change responds to the way that it's managed. The more skillfully you manage change, the more successful you will be in bringing about your desired new norm. So the starting point in managing change is defining what the status quo is that you want to be different. And then you need to articulate the specific new normal that you want to bring about. The more clearly you can define your starting point and your ending point and the direction of the change process you intend to manage, the more cooperative change will be in your effort to manage it. So the direction in which you manage change is crucial. Practical change management, get it? Practical works in this real world for real people. It's got to be practical. You can get a doctoral degree in change management and not be a good change manager, because theory does not work. What works is what actually works for people in the real world. And here's one thing that you need to know. Change management will only yield a positive outcome if you manage in a forward direction toward a specific goal, and here's why. Life does not operate in reverse. Despite the best efforts of scientists and science fiction writers, no one has yet invented the technology that's going to allow us to go back in time. So, attempting to devise a change management plan with the intention of returning to some good old days or the way things used to be, you're going to be frustrated. It's futile. It's doomed to failure. No matter how much you may yearn for the way it was for yesterday, the past is the past. You cannot go back. For this reason, your practical change management plan must always face forward, never backward. And in the same way that it cannot go backward, it cannot just take you away from a current status quo. This is true because change management requires a distinct target toward which to work, and away from is not a destination. As you prepare to develop a practical change management plan that you can apply to a change in your personal or professional life or your organization, be careful to clearly identify the direction you intend the change to go and the specific new normal that you intend the change to bring about. Now, before we get to number 10 and our delicious what's waiting for us, I want to tell you a sneaky little secret about my work. You may not need any of this to begin with. Although practical change management is applicable to virtually every change management situation, this does not mean that every change must be managed. And it doesn't mean, it means that you don't have to be the one to manage every change. Let me repeat that for those of us who have a control issue. You do not have to be the one to manage every change in your life. So how do you know if a change must be managed, and or if you're the one who has to manage it. Here's how. If the change is not significant to you, and if it does not conflict with your values or your desires, and if it does not cause you lasting discomfort, pain, or stress, then let it take its path. Let somebody else manage it. In reality, that's what we do in most of our lives, right? For most of our lives. If we tried to manage every change in our life, we would not have time to live. But when a change is significant, when it does conflict with your values or your desires, and when it does cause you discomfort, pain, or stress, that is a change calling out for practical change management. So now, you're gonna need a plan. And that brings us to number 2. Turn your papers over. This is where I'm going to end. The purpose of practical change management is to illuminate and ease the path of change in your personal and professional life or your organization. And the only way to accomplish this is to plan your practical change management process first, and then put your plan into action. When my clients come to me and they want something in the snap of a finger, that is not how change works. Change is evolutionary. Hello, haven't you been listening to me? A practical change management plan is a written, step-by-step outline of how you will move from your current status quo through the process and to your projected new normal. And I find it important, but I find it always important in all things to commit this to writing somehow, so that you can see it in its entirety, so that you can refer to it, and so that you can use it to monitor your progress as you move forward. It can be as detailed or as broad as you want, but either way, I believe that you will find, now remember, we're talking about significant change here. We're talking about change that does impact your values and your desires. The small stuff, don't sweat it. For this big stuff, make a plan. Tell me what it is that you want to change and where you want it to end up. Because that will bring about results far better and far faster than entering the change process with only hope, wishes, and good intentions. Hello, hope is not a plan. In The Secret Life of Change, in my book, I provide a 25-question outline that you answer the questions, and that will help you to define the different categories of actions that you have to take. And taking the very taking of those actions puts you into the change management process. We don't have time for all 25, but I do share 8 with you. I think they're the 8 most important on your page. What is the specific status quo that I want to change? What is the specific new normal that I want to bring about? What will be my own level of participation in this change? Am I going to be the driver of this? Am I going to have a co-pilot? Who are the people, right? We need people to bring about the changes in our lives. What are the specific first steps, next steps, last steps that must be taken in order to get from here to there? And then you find that there are concentric plans that come in. Because if you say, well, to get this going, I need $5,000, hold on, we got to go back now because you don't have $5,000. So that's another change process that we have to get in cycle. And that's really what our lives are, right? For better or worse, we're all spinning plates all the time of changes at different points in different cycles of change. My purpose here is just to illuminate that for you, to tell you your process, it's normal. What you're going through inside, it's normal. Everybody goes through it. Expect it, accept it, move through it. And to make it easier for you, by telling you that if you commit this to paper, if you think this through before you move into or out of a significant change, your process will yield far better results for you. What are the foreseeable multipotent effects of the change? How will I manage them? What resources will I need to move through the change? besides me, who else will be involved in this change? So important, so important. You could be a brilliant change manager, but if you forget about the other people who are going to be involved in this, even tangentially, those are the situations that can sabotage your forward motion, because that little part of them that's in your change is so significant in their experience of the change. Like that chair that we changed. It became a whole drama. And all we needed to do was say, Linda, we're bringing in new chairs. We're going to give you, you want the green one or the blue one? That, by the way, little aside here, I found this worked with my children. If I want them to drink juice, I don't say, do you want juice? I say, do you want apple juice or orange juice, right? So you create the paradigm where people perceive that they have a choice, but actually you're managing the situation. We can talk privately later about whether you think that's manipulative or not. I don't personally care, so there you go. And how will I stay in alignment with my own values and my own desires throughout the change process and into the new normal? So that's 10. I'm going to give you an extra one. I know we're running a little over time, but I always like to give a little bit more than I get. So I just want to give you 4 questions to ask when there's another directed change, another a change that is in your life that has been placed there by somebody else, by another source. How do you manage that situation? So when you're involved in or affected by another source change that's significant to you, you're at the risk of being managed by somebody else's change process. To avoid this, you have to plan to manage as much of the process that involves or affects you as possible. So here are 4 questions to help you decide your own participation in and management of another source change. Number 1, does the process or the projected outcome of the change conflict with my values and my desires? Values and desires, right? Values are things that you move toward and things that you move away from. Desires are things that you want or don't want in your life. If the process or the outcome does conflict with your values or your, if it does not conflict with your values or your desires, how much of your resources are you willing to put into it? If you're not willing to put any resources into it, then that's a decision, and you're going to have to deal with the consequences of that. But if the process or the outcome does conflict with your values or your desires, you have to ask yourself, how much am I willing to compromise? Because putting yourself in that position where you are compelled to change your behaviors, even though it goes against your values and your desires, you will be unhappy eternally. So just articulating these questions brings the reality of them to your consciousness, and we know that a mind expanded, blah, 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 can't go back, so sorry, but now you're going to have to go and think of this. And if I am unwilling to compromise for this particular change that is being imposed on me by somebody else, what are my own self-sourced management options? What decision do I have to make? What change process do I have to initiate for my own sanity to take the crazy out of that change? So, I see by the clock on the wall that I'm way past my session time. I want to leave you with these 2 thoughts. The first is this. Change will cooperate better with you under practical change management than it ever will without it. Even so, the powerful, profound, and persistent nature of change can never be fully tamed. Therefore, you must always be aware of the relationship between the change process and your progress forward toward your desired outcome. And you must continuously be mindful and adjust your resources and the way you direct them until you have successfully brought about your desired new normal. And second, I believe that practical change management is the best way to take the crazy out of change. It's a solution-based system that takes both the logic and the human experience of change into account. It requires you to define your outcome and to monitor your progress through the process. And because of that, I believe that you'll find that practical change management can be applied successfully to every change in your personal or professional life or your organization. I want to thank you again for coming this evening. I want to thank Sally Lehman and Sue and Jennifer for bringing us together. If you would like a free copy of The Secret Life of Change, please fill out the form and drop it off to me before you leave, or send me an email with your name and share a few words about your experience this evening. I will email you the entire book for your use and for sharing with other people. Let's get a discussion, a real dialogue started about change, because just look around you. We need better managed change, and we may be mature adults now, but if we fail again to educate the next generation of how to manage change, we will be a world descending into chaos. I don't mean to sound alarmist, but I'm ringing an alarm. All the information you need is on the handout, and I also invite you to contact me privately if I can be of service to you. Thank you again for your attention. I hope I've given you value today, and I'm eager to open the floor and see if we have any discussion. Thank you.